Whether your beer is in a bottle, can, or glass, kick back and relax. It's Better on Draft.
Hello and welcome to Better on Draft, episode 391. Today we will be talking about Lone Star Beer with Jeremy Banas, who recently wrote a book about it. But before we get to that, let's talk to Wendy. Hey, Wendy, how are you? What are you drinking?
I'm doing fantastic today. I have got a batch brewing company, Lush 3, their anniversary beer.
Very nice.
It is delicious. It's a bourbon barrel aged double mash imperial stout.
You're going with the big stuff again.
It's Friday night.
Yeah, let's go. As for myself, I've got a Three Floyds Gumball Head in a can. That's a relatively new packaging thing in that I'm old, and they've probably been doing it for 10 years, but it's still relatively new to me. It's a wonderful beer to be able to find. But as I mentioned, with us today is Jeremy Banas. Hello, Jeremy. How are you? What are you drinking?
I'm doing great. Well, actually, I've now just got a very nice Coke Zero. I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's all right. Nope. It is certainly allowed. We had someone on drinking water once.
That's okay.
It happens.
So, Jeremy, you just recently published a book. This is your third or fourth book?
Fourth book.
Fourth book.
Yes,
and we would love to talk to you about it. So can you give us a little intro about the book itself and then how you came to write it?
Absolutely. So the book is called Lone Star Beer, a tale of two iconic San Antonio breweries. The title, as the title sort of indicates, two Lone Star breweries. The Lone Star Brewery that everybody knows now may still see bottles or cans in the stores that everybody's known in the last really coming up on 90 years really, but that wasn't the first Lone Star Brewery. The first one started in 1884 and was started by Adolphus Busch of Anheuser-Busch, of course, and some local San Antonio investors. He ended up buying them out, and that lasted until a year into Prohibition. Didn't want to keep it open, even doing non-alcoholic stuff, so he closed that down. But then you have the Lone Star Brewery everybody knows now that started in 1940, and that's the first time anybody ever saw a beer called Lone Star. But there was a lot of confusion with it. Knowing that there was a Lone Star Brewery that opened in 1884, a lot of people over the decades, way before they even closed, the current one closed in 96, people equated their history back to that 1884 because they were both called Lone Star. So the book was, some of the story was in the first book that I co-wrote with a friend of mine, Travis Poling. But that confusion on the history and us not being able to put a lot about it to begin with, about both of them to begin with in the first one, necessitated the writing of this book to clarify that story kind of once and for all.
And I finished the book just yesterday, in fact, on my right before my flight home. I was down in Dallas this last week. Wrong Texas City, but Texas City nonetheless. And I thought it was fascinating. I enjoyed reading about the original one and just the ties there with Adolphus Busch, as you said. And I just had to imagine, I couldn't imagine how hard it would have been to find actual information about it because of the time period and I would say shortness, but that would be 30 plus years that it was in existence. So it just seemed like that was a bit of a dive into the archives. So do you want to talk about, was it a dive into the archives?
Quite a bit. And there was, in some ways, a lot to find about that first Lone Star. And it was, technically the Lone Star Brewing Association, but it also marketed as the Lone Star Brewing Company. But there was kind of a lot and also really not a whole lot about it. I was hoping to have a little more of the book talking about that. But again, just not enough to do even a couple of more chapters, and that's okay. Still, everything that was in there is a whole lot more than anybody ever knew. Just in my researching, when I was finding some stuff out there, there was very little. There was a San Antonio Brewing Association. Adolphus Busch was involved at some point, and then they closed, and then that's it. So I mean, that was probably the harder part of the research, was finding that early stuff. I spent a decent amount of time on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of showed. It looked like you had to really search around for stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the second Lone Star, I thought that one was interesting with its roots in Mexico.
Oh yeah, that one. That was something else. And I didn't, until I started working on it, that was something that I had heard about, but hadn't found anything really on it. And so I quoted in the book when I'm talking about that part of the story, but just for anybody who hasn't read it yet, the second Lone Star, that technically began in 1940, really began in the 1920s in Sabinas, Mexico. It was a guy named Carl Hagelin who lived in Atchison, Kansas, and worked at a brewery with his father when he was a young child, and a little bit as he was older. Then ended up opening a brewery of his own once he moved. Well, not when he moved back up to the U.S. He moved back up to the U.S. a little bit, worked at a brewery in St. Joseph, Missouri, but then wanted to open up another brewery. He had a chance encounter with Otto Kaler, who was one of the founders and ended up being the principal owner of the San Antonio Brewing Association that became the Pearl, and said, hey, American businessmen are getting a lot of good deals going down to Mexico and opening businesses, employing local workers. And he's like, well, seems like a great place to go down and open the brewery. So he goes down and opens the brewery in Sabinas, Mexico. But before he left in 32 and started the move up to San Antonio in 33, when Pancho Villa was still very much active, skirting into southern parts of Texas, which of course did not make the United States Army happy at all. They're having trouble trying to catch him going back into Mexico, so they're trying to work with the Mexican government. But Pancho Villa's last stand really was in Sabinas, Mexico. And where it got interesting was with essentially Carl Hagelin getting kidnapped by Pancho Villa, him and his family. They came into Mexico, or came into Sabinas. Location-wise, it was great for them. They ended up setting up shop at the brewery as their kind of headquarters. Because he was of German descent, he would have been first generation. His dad was came over from Germany. There was German stuff all over the walls. Well, Pancho Villa loved German stuff, so they kind of didn't bug him too much outside of taking over his brewery and of course taking money out of the coffers at the brewery, and then take him and his family and sequester them in his home. So he was kidnapped, but not necessarily like taken to some secret location. It was more of a, you're not going to be going anywhere until this is done. But he was making his last stand. He was having parts of his troops surround the city to combat the Mexican army. Him and his wife and family are treated very well. The troops of his were called Villistas, so there were many of those at the house armed that were there. And although they would play cards with them, cook them meals, eat with them, and drink with them together, there was no mistake that they couldn't go anywhere. He finally was able to get out of it by paying Pancho Villa a decent sum of money for that time. And he's like, okay, well, you're free to go. And not long after that, he worked something out with the president of Mexico and surrendered. But at that point in time, it's like within a year or two after that, he kind of decided, I think this is just a little too volatile now all of a sudden for me. So, they kind of had wanted to open a brewery in San Antonio to begin with. So they went ahead and moved up to San Antonio in 33, and they built the first building that later ended up having the words Lone Star all over, the side of it. But it was the Sabinas Brewery of San Antonio this time. He kept some brewing operations in Mexico, though. But yeah, it was quite a journey for him to get there. But yeah, that's just the beginning part of the second Lone Star.
Right. I very much enjoyed the picture in the book of him with Poncho.
Oh yeah, no, his whole family, they're all right there. It's like, let's take a photo before we leave.
It was pretty impressive.
Oh yeah.
So I noticed a bit of a rivalry at least a couple of times. I don't know if it was it probably was a real one, but or at least in your writing with the Pearl Brewing.
Oh yeah, and I didn't talk about it quite as much because I didn't feel I needed to necessarily focus on the rivalry, but bringing it up a little bit here and there. But it was a pretty serious rivalry.
Okay. Well, yeah, you only brought it up a couple times here and there. Usually, when Lone Star was saying things like they are making the most beer in all of Texas, and you'd point out that the numbers didn't agree with that.
No, I was like, I knew that wasn't right, but I was able to find one of the guys that wrote a foreword to the book, Charlie Stotts. He had a whole bunch of records that the state had in regards to numbers that each brewery at that time were producing and selling. And I mean, outside of a few years, Pearl outsold Lone Star. I mean, definitely outsold Lone Star, but there were a few years. But yeah, the statement of we're the best selling brand in Texas was, I guess, partially true and mostly not.
Right. Yeah, like all good marketing.
Oh yeah, but the employees.
I wanted to touch
really
on.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I think I'm lagging right now. I wanted to touch on in the second founding, how they got to do the name Lone Star for the Lone Star beer. I thought that was an interesting story too.
Yeah, the Adolphus Busch still had the copyright for quite a while, even though the brewery had closed and was essentially used as a mill for a little bit after he closed it. And then the copyright kind of expired. Another gentleman who had hopes of opening up the Lone Star Brewing Company or Lone Star Brewing Association again bought the copyright, but he hadn't done anything with it. So they had their lawyers, really heavily look into it because they just thought rebranding, and this would have been the third rebranding for Sabina. Sabina's rebranded as Champion with small change in ownership in 39. That lasted about 10 months. And they're like, we got to bring more money in. Gentleman who had San Miguel Brewery in the Philippines brought that money in and a master brewer to help start the new beer. They wanted to rebrand as Lone Star, but there was one problem. They didn't own the copyright. This gentleman that got it from Adolphus did. But they were able to really kind of pressure and get the government to kind of help go, okay, well, if he's not using it and he's had it for this period of time and he hasn't done anything to indicate he's going to be using it, you can use it. Well, they ended up not ever really being truly told they could. It was official they could use it. They just said, well, we haven't heard back from the guy, so we're now Lone Star Brewing Company. And, then the first label reflected that, and then just Lone Star Beer on the front. But yeah, it was a, interesting story. And that was some harder information to find. Again, it was one of those things that I'd heard about, but I needed to find concrete evidence on it. So.
Yeah. So when you're looking for that concrete evidence, what kind of places are you looking?
Everywhere. I tapped into, seriously, everywhere. I tapped into beer memorabilia collectors, both in Texas and nationally. I tapped into, of course, some of the archives at various universities, a lot of online research, but again, being careful with online research that involved legitimate sources. Using newspapers.com or newspaperarchives.com allowed me to more easily look at old newspaper articles about them, whether it was just an ad or an actual article about expansion or whatever. It was interviews with people. Obviously, couldn't interview anybody involved with the first one, but there were enough people still around that either worked there or were related to somebody who was running the company with the second Lone Star, at least from the 50s and 60s on up part, that I could interview and talk to. But it was really just kind of a hodgepodge of everything, traditional sources and unconventional ones.
Well, I thought you brought it together pretty well in a cohesive story.
Thank
so
you.
It seemed like you sourced pretty well.
So was this something that you decided that you wanted to do after writing the first book, or did somebody come to you and say, "Hey, you should do this"?
Well, I had. It was really when I started working on the second book, which was the first one I did myself, on Pearl. That hadn't been done before either. One comprehensive history. So it was in working on that, because we had 2 full chapters on it in the first book. That was just an overall history of brewing in the San Antonio area. And I was like, this 2 chapters really wasn't enough. There's so much more to this story. So I would start working on that. And somebody's like, well, actually, there's a couple of these memorabilia collectors. You really need to do a book on Lone Star. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. We really didn't. We found enough between the 2 of them to kind of do one book or one chapter in the first book, but there's no way I'm going to have enough for a full book. And they're like, oh, no, there would be plenty. Trust me. And well, I ended up working on a biography of a Belgian brewer, Pierre Celis, for the third book. And then I'm working on that. And I'm like, you know what? I'm, just in talking to some more of those memorabilia collectors and other people, they're like, you really should revisit going back and doing Lone Star. We really think you might be able to eventually find more information. I'm like, it was something I kind of, I wanted to do. I just didn't think I'd have enough to do enough of a book that would make it worth it for anybody to want to read, let alone me write. But as I started the initial research and, decided to pitch the publisher, said, okay, we're going to do it. We'll figure it out. And I start researching it before I'm even writing word one, and then getting in contact with person A, who puts me in contact with person B and C, and they put me in contact with somebody else, or this resource and that. And I'm like, oh crap, I'm going to have enough for a book here. Yeah. So that was kind of it. It was others revisiting it, the idea for me. And then of course, as I started it, really realizing that, yeah, there was plenty for it. So
I'm going to get away from asking questions specifically about the book for a minute, because I'm really curious how you got into writing about the history of beer.
That is a question I love to answer, just because it involves my family and family history, and then my own just love of history of anything. There's a brewery in Denver, Colorado, that was around from 1859 to 1969. They had a resurgence in 2013 up until last year, when they stopped brewing in the original brew house. But it's a Tivoli Brewing Company. My family were the last owners from 65 to 69. It was the Ochado family out of Pueblo, Colorado. So they were second cousins for me, but or third cousins for me, I guess. But first cousins for my grandfather. The son of one of the 2 brothers that opened it is still alive. And so a lot of information from him and the right to use the name was what allowed the new Tivoli Brewing Company to reopen in the original brew house. My grandfather and I, on his 90th birthday, literally just a few years before he passed, went back to it. And I'd been to it many times, but he actually hadn't been back in the building since his family closed it. Him and I got to brew with them that day. So we were the first ones of the family to brew there since 1969. And that was incredible. Business Journal in Denver did a nice little story on it. And that's, by the way, going to be the next book. But it just wasn't the right time to work on that one. But it was just that already writing about beer and not articles and stuff, nothing that was a pamphlet or a book, obviously, like that, but it was all of that, the family history, the love of writing, and My uncle being a longtime wine writer who got me into writing, wanting to write about adult beverages to begin with. That really kind of pushed the writing about beer to begin with, but then that just kind of segued into the books, which is now where I really feel like I've kind of found a stride on writing. I love still doing articles, and I always will do them, but I love just diving into that research, finding out stories of the people behind the article, not just writing a book with this opened here, they expanded here, there's this many barrels, they sold this much, then they opened this. It was, telling the story of the people themselves. So, like the Pancho Villa story, things like that. It's like, to me, it makes history more palatable, let alone, because, I mean, when it comes down to it, it may be about beer, but it's a history book about beer. So, it's trying to make it more palatable history for folks and weaving in stories along with all those kind of dry facts sometimes.
Yeah, there's a section in this one where you do go through the brewing capacity, but it's more from the standpoint of this is how fast this brewery is growing, and it was pretty substantial growth curve there.
Oh yeah, no, they expanded when they rebranded in 1940, and that was again when it was when Sabinas moved up in 33. Those first years until 39, those first 6 years were tough for them. They didn't quite find their footing, and even though he had been successful in Mexico and still, for a little bit had operations there, they just never found their footing. Pearl, it wasn't known as Pearl yet. They hadn't rebranded, but Pearl was just too dominant in San Antonio. They didn't find a way to crack that. So hence a little bit of ownership change in 39, a rebranding to Champion Brewing, and their beer was called Champ Beer. That also, again, like I said, didn't catch on and necessitated the change, but it was changing it to Lone Star, capitalizing on Texas and Texas history. Because the very first Lone Star beer label has a graphic of Texas, and then around the edges, it names different aspects of Texas history around it. So they were really trying to harp on that because, as we know, those born and raised in Texas are very, very proud of being Texan, and they should be. There's a lot of great things about Texas and its history. I mean, no state's perfect, obviously, but they have a right to be proud. They were their own country for a little while too. So capitalizing on that, I think, is really what propelled them into that. And then, in the 70s, of course, is when they themselves coined it. It was part of one of their marketing campaigns, the National Beer of Texas. But just continuing throughout their history, no matter what campaigns they were doing, tapping into being Texan. If you're drinking Lone Star, you're a Texan. Pearl was just so established and did their own version of it, but they outright calling themselves Lone Star. Cowboys in some of the ads. All of that is just, everybody drank it up, so to speak, and that allowed for that expansion. They had to meet need. It wasn't expansion for the sake of expanding. It was expansion out of necessity.
So if you're pivoting to a book about Tivoli brewing, it seems like you're stepping into a whole different state then.
I am. I'm stepping back into my home state of Colorado. I will come back and do Texas. I've got a couple of ideas on other things to do for Texas as well that I think could be whole books on their own also. But just with raising my 3 boys myself and working a day job full time, didn't really have a lot of time to be able to go back and forth between Texas and Colorado and have time on the ground, so to speak, interviewing people, researching. Even the cousin that still lives in Pueblo that worked at Tivoli, it just, I couldn't be doing that 2 or 3 times a month or once a month even, and spending a few days or a week to be able to really do that. Because honestly, you can only do so much online even now, and you really need to go back and do old school beat reporting, beat researching, so to speak, and just actually pounding the pavement, going out and finding the information. Now that all 3 of the boys are out of college, it is the time where I can now travel more and I can spend more time somewhere else. So letting this this book do its thing for a little bit. I'll probably get in on starting on the Tivoli one. So yeah, but I'll come back. But I felt, it's like that's another historic brewery. It's like Colorado's version of the Pearl. That was one continuous brewery in ownership, but then also the family connection. I just kind of felt like it was a book I needed to do. So I may branch out of Texas more after that, but I'll probably come back to Texas first after this Tivoli book.
Kind of along those lines, one of your other books is Celis.
Celis, yes.
Celis. And I feel like I was at one in Austin, right near their soccer stadium a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago.
You would have been. They reopened in 2017. Pierre Celis had started his brewery as a Brouwery Celis in his farmhouse in Hoegaarden, Belgium, in 66, and having brought back an extinct wit beer style. There were 3 different wit beer styles, but the Hoegaarden wit beer style out of the 3 was the much more popular in Belgium. It was, the other 2 towns that brewed a wit beer brought Hoegaarden wit beer, and there was such a demand for it. So, but it spread with a little help of the beer writer Michael Jackson, and his love of Belgian beer and his connection with Pierre Celis. That helped Pierre and the popularity of that style, really kind of outside of a Hefeweizen, one of the original hazy beer, to spread around Europe. And then through some misfortune with a fire in the late 80s, being underinsured, he had to bring in investment money from Stella Artois, which was still an independent brewery. But once a company called Interbrews bought Stella, they became InBev, and he started getting pushed out. He was relegated to a desk at the office. He didn't go out and do what he did best, connecting with the people and selling the beer. He was a great brewer, but he was as much of a marketer as anything else. So he ended up taking cash out on his remaining shares and went to Austin. There was a little bit of a Belgian connection for him. The first importer to bring Hoegaarden wit beer into the United States was in Austin, Texas. A family friend who was from Hoegaarden that he grew up with had eventually moved to Austin. Water profile was similar to Hoegaarden in Austin. So, and he's like, hey, this is a college town. College kids drink beer. So hence the move to Austin. But, again, a little misfortune later on where he was expanding at a necessity, but needing investment money for that this time around. He got into partnership with Philip Morris, who owned Miller at the time. And Miller didn't know what they had. They had already bought Leinenkugel, and Jacob Leinenkugel at the time was a big selling point for Pierre into going into partnership, so to speak, with Miller. But Celis was a different animal. This was Belgian beer, and he was doing a couple of different beers that were more what American palates might have known at that time, but he didn't know what he had. It was too small of a brewery. Leinenkugel had been around a whole lot longer, as we know, even by the 80s. They were much bigger and more established than Pierre's Austin brewery. So they didn't know what they had. They trimmed the fat, so to speak, on expenses, which led to not using real raspberry for their raspberry beer. It led to using inferior malt on top of it. He couldn't source some of the same things. And then they just decided at one point in time, because they owned about, at that point, roughly 70 to 80% of Pierre's brewery in Austin, that they were like, okay, well, you know what? We just want out of this. His daughter, Christine, who wrote a foreword to the book, said, we're done. This isn't what this was meant to be for us, even taking in money from them. So they took a cash out on what little they had left of the brewery. And it was not long after that, as in very short period of time, that Miller just shut it down. They sold off the equipment and the brand to a guy in Michigan who was basically brewing the three main beers, the Celis White and the Grand Cru and the Raspberry. But the quality of it was nothing to write home about. No offense to that gentleman. I'm sure he tried as hard as he could, but he had financial troubles too. And so it kind of died. It just, unfortunately, the impact Pierre had on brewing around the United States, let alone the impact he had on brewing around the world, was crazy. I mean, the only reason anyone in the world, let alone anyone in the United States, is brewing a wit beer now is because of Pierre Celis. And that really took foothold when he came to the US, and Celis White is everywhere. So we all know Allagash Brewing in Maine, the famous Allagash White, which is a national and international award winner. Rob Todd started that brewery out of love for Celis White, and that's why the very first beer was Allagash White. And I mean, out of any that I have personally tried, I can't say anybody in the United States' wit beers that I haven't tried aren't as good, but that is probably the closest to a true wit beer. And Pierre's legacy also is that the two other wit beer styles died out within a few years of him revitalizing the Hoegaarden style. And with that having spread, they close. And now the only definition of what goes into a wit beer, you go to BJCP guidelines, everything, the definition is a Hoegaarden wit beer. It's Pierre's Hoegaarden wit beer that is that definition now. So in the book, I did a whole chapter on the history of wit beer, the three different ones, and the brewing styles historically about it to give more information. So to me, his impact is he may not have brought back wit beer, period. He brought back one of the three main wit beers, but his became the only definition we use to this day. He mentored breweries in Austin, 512 Brewing being one of them. Brad at Real Ale. There were countless others in Austin that got their start, have since closed, but several that are still open. And you talk to half of anybody who's been around the last 40 years in modern American brewing, and they will give love to Pierre Celis. To me, that was why doing the book was telling his story, not so much the story of the current Celis or the Celis in Austin, but just telling his story. And you're talking about the breweries during that time. Part of the interview in working on that book was with Garrett Oliver of Brooklyn Brewing, and just talking to his interactions with Pierre. And one thing he told me, and I put this quote in the book, was if Pierre Celis is not in your pantheon of beer gods, you don't know what you're talking about. And that was very telling to me, kind of reinforced when I was already working on the research for it and already had the book deal. It reinforced why the story was so important to do. So that one, each book has become kind of a love affair with the people that made up the whole story. So apologize, that was a little bit longer of an answer.
No, it's good.
But,
That's okay. It was a great answer, actually. I have, it actually made me look a couple things up. So it was actually Michigan Beer Company is the
Correct.
Michigan brewery that opened or that bought Celis.
Correct.
In 2012, I think. No,
Yes,
2012, 2002.
Correct. And then that's when they contract brewed. And actually one funny note is with the rebooted Austin Celis, when his daughter Christine reopened it in 2017, she was able to acquire one of the two original brew kettles that her and her dad used in the first Austin brewery. One of them, the guy that had it didn't want to sell it. Another guy was able to find the second one and convince the owner to sell it, so they bought it. And now, if you walk into the tap room cellars. They've now got an outside beer garden and an outside bar. But if you walk into the main inside tap room and you look above the bar itself, you'll see what was a cut in half copper brew kettle from the 90s when, I mean, of course, he had it made in Europe, but that brew kettle got from the first cellus got incorporated into the second cellus, kind of allowing for that bridge between the first and the second one. I just
awesome.
thought that was a great way to segue into reopening it.
Yeah, it was one of those things where when I was there, the bartender, it was her second day at the job, so I didn't know as much as she might have known otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, and they have the book in their they carry the book there in their gift shop. I don't know if they have any copies right now or not, but they've been kind enough to carry the book in there, and Christine's helped a lot with that. Of course, she was a huge help on the research for that book. I got access to family stuff that nobody had seen before, or somebody, if they saw it, hadn't seen it in decades. Copy of the original paper that where he basically restructured his farmhouse, which was a milk farm at that point in time, into the brewery. And this is before he moved a little bit down the street, so to speak, in Hugarden and built the Brewery de Cluse, which was his first big kind of production brewery. I have a copy of that paper. I had a copy of the original agreement between him and the company that the import company in Austin that originally brought in Hugarden beer. I had a copy of that, and I put that in the book. So it's like looking at all these original documents, holding them, knowing how simple they may have seemed at the time, and they're just a piece of paper with an agreement, but knowing what they led to. And that's really been with all the books, holding some of these original things that you know may have been hoped to be big, but a contract here or an interview there just led to bigger things for each of these books, or for the people in these books.
Yeah.
So that's been the most fun part, is just connecting with everybody that was involved in it, if they're still around, or again, people who grew up. My dad worked at the brewery for 30 years, and oh my God, you're doing this. And it's, I mean, when I did the official book launch a few days ago in San Antonio, I had people who literally, my dad worked there, or I worked there for 40 years. And you're connecting with those families, or this was my first beer and that's all my dad ever drank, you know, and connecting with those people, with people now that are associated to the story somehow. I mean, to me, it's like, it doesn't matter if I make a dime on the book. That to me was really why the story was important and why it needed to be preserved. But seeing an impact to people, it's humbling.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of San Antonio, I was recently there. So I've talked a little bit on the show about some of the breweries that I hit that I really liked. Before we got on air, I was telling you about how much I enjoyed Roadmap. Why don't you have obviously a vast knowledge of Texas beer. Why don't you give us, our listeners, some recommendations on some breweries to go to if they're in Texas?
Oh, absolutely. So are we sticking to San Antonio or just Texas in general?
Whatever you think
Yeah.
to go to.
We have so many now. I mean, when we started seeing a resurgence in Texas with you know, in the early 90s with beer, and again, just to put this partially in perspective, Pearl was the only continuously operating brewery in San Antonio throughout San Antonio's history. It never stopped operating even during Prohibition, doing a near beer, which was legal, and a soda, and many other things. So they still had a brewery. Austin, last brewery was 1878 before Pierre opened Celis in 1990. You fast forward to the early 2000s, and there's maybe 4 or 5 in Texas. A couple had opened, couple have closed. Waterloo Brewing was the first legal brew pub in the state of Texas. That was in Austin, and Austin has blown up. San Antonio's gotten bigger. Houston's gotten bigger. Dallas has blown up, and then it's almost any small town you go to, there's a brewery. It may be a smaller one, like let's say a 1-barrel system, but you've got a little brewery there. Orlando, Texas, which is not too far from Fredericksburg, Texas, and really not too far from Austin. Not a large town, a few thousand people. They got a brewery. It's great. Them I would recommend. I enjoyed their beer when I was there. It's also the original location for Cooper's Barbecue, which is a favorite of many in Texas. I'll start with San Antonio, though. I'll say you mentioned Roadmap, and they're phenomenal. Dustin and his staff and his brewer have done an incredible job the time they have been open. They've deserved every accolade. You mentioned before we started Thirsty Pups. Eric and his wife have done a phenomenal job with that place as well. I definitely would recommend them. And boy, it's hard to pick a few out of all the many. They're all really good and great to go to. Long Tab, I would say in San Antonio, you definitely need to go to. Kunstler Brewing as well in San Antonio. Ranger Creek's another one, and I know I'm going to leave people out, so if they're watching, I don't hate me for not remembering.
I did put you on the spot with it.
Right, yeah.
I'm gonna have somebody contact me and go, "You didn't mention me." I'm
gonna mention Freetail only because of the bat.
Thank you. God, see, I knew I was forgetting them when we talked about that one. Freetail Brewing. They a little smaller now than what they had been since 2009 when they opened, but they're fantastic as well. I would definitely go there. Back Unturned Brewing in San Antonio, Idle Brewing, Pint House Pizza, which has multiple locations in Austin, and each one of those brew their own beer. They recently expanded to San Antonio and opened one here, and that one's, I mean, it's so good. Definitely recommend going there. New Braunfels, where I'm currently living, definitely need to go to Five Stones Brewing and Guadalupe Brewing. Let's see here. Austin, you're going to want to go to 512 Brewing. They've been around for a while. They are still fantastic. Live Oak Brewing, you need to go to Celis. We brought up Celis earlier. I'd definitely go to Celis. Austin Beer Works. And again, I know I'm leaving some out. Austin's just got quite a few in such a short geography. So if anybody thinks of any, let me know. And I can tell you.
There's one near Celis that I just could not remember the name of, but they were really neat. Just west and a little south of Celis. But they had a food truck on site. It looked like a permanent.
It might have been Austin Beer Works. They have a food truck on site that they own, and now they've got 2 locations now, but that one particular one, if it was near Celis, that might have been them.
The food was spectacular there. It was so good.
Yeah. Oh no, it's. I think I had a burger the last time I was there. It was very good. We've got see it on the spot. I hate that, but we've got. Say I hate this. I could, if I think of more, I'll jump in and name some more, because I know I'm leaving Houston and Dallas out, and some of the smaller towns as well. But if I think of them, I'll bring them up.
Yeah, and I was just in Dallas. Unfortunately, it was not a good trip for getting beer. Working 10-hour days and then going out to dinner with everybody, and one of those working trips where it's fun to see everybody, but you're not getting to do the things you want to do.
Yeah.
But I've worked there other times, and I have been to Four Corners. I quite enjoyed it. And there's, I think it's the Exchange is the food hall right near them, if I'm remembering right. But like that whole, that
Four
was
Corners.
One evening. Yeah, I quite enjoyed them.
Petacalis is another one. I'm thinking of a couple of them. Petacalis is up there. Rar and Sons. Petacalis is amazing. Rar and Sons is, I mean, again, they all brew great beer. You've got Lakewood Brewing up there, and they've actually started now brewing some of the Rar and Sons beers, but they're great as well. I like Lakewood. If folks are into barrel-aged beers. They do a good amount of barrel-aged stouts. Um, very creative on what they do, but the quality's there. The gentleman that owns it, Wim Bems, he's Belgian descent, and he's going to hate me if he's listening, but I believe he's first generation Belgian. But that, and he worked at Rohr and Sons for a while, and then decided to open his own place. But he's killing it too. He's doing a great job. And Michael Petikalis is doing a fantastic job with that. He actually helped with getting some of the beer laws changed in the last 15 years in Texas, as did the gentleman that opened up Freetail Brewing originally. He's no longer with there. He now works with Maui Brewing. But Scott Metzger was another one that was intricate to helping get some of those laws changed.
I saw you also write articles around for, the Full Pint would be one example, but it looked like for the Brewers Association as well. So what are you writing? Historical articles about styles? What kind of things are you writing out there?
Yeah, and I haven't done anything for the two of those two publications in a little while. I'd love to again. I still talk to the guys from the Full Pint, and I still very much talk to the folks with the Brewers Association. But a lot of times my articles they're going to be more contemporary unless it needs to be a truly just historical perspective on something. But in each article, if I'm writing about just a release, or I'm writing about a new brewery opening up, I try putting in that historical aspect to it. I'm giving context to the style, to the area, to that brewery, what were their origins, how'd they get into beer, and giving that history so we have context before we discuss, okay, here are their core beers, here's where they got their equipment, here's what they have on Tuesday nights, and all that kind of stuff. Again, it's the telling the story. So I do kind of weave that approach I do with the books into the articles, which is kind of how I started off doing like a lot of folks had done simple beer reviews, and that morphed into writing full-on articles, because I was reviewing a beer, and I would write a little bit of a short history of the style and a little bit of a short history of that brewery, and then I'd review the beer. So it was like, I had a friend of mine, Jason Armstrong, who used to be the national sales rep for Stone Brewing, tell me, you're really more writing mini articles here. You really just need to expand it. And that's how that kind of got started. So yeah, I guess to sort of circle back to your question on that, they're contemporary. It could be anything from food pairings with beer, article on every brewer, taking 10 brewers out of San Antonio, and what's your guilty pleasure beer, or a beer people would think is a guilty pleasure. Anything and everything on that.
Now I'm curious what your guilty pleasure beer is.
See, and it's also a question that I hate answering. That and what's your favorite beer? Because my kind of asshole answer is the beer in my hand.
Me too.
Or whatever's in my fridge, and that is partially true. And guilty pleasure beers, I mean, I wouldn't call it I'll answer it two ways. As far as a guilty pleasure beer that people think would be a guilty pleasure that you just don't want to talk about, I'm going to go Pacifica Clara. For a Mexican lager, that is, to me, not just the best of those, but I actually enjoy drinking it. And it's at the prices you pay for a Pacifico sometimes, even at the store. It's almost like it's a premium beer. But a lot of folks would look at that as a guilty pleasure. I look at that as hey, if I'm in a restaurant and they don't have something else I like, and I see Pacifico, I'm like, oh, hell, I'll take that in a heartbeat. Yeah. My other half of the answer would be an answer that Jason Davis, who has now brews for Abita Brewing in New Orleans, at their brew pub there, not the production in Abita Springs, but he has, since the early 90s, been involved in Texas brewing, and he helped get Freetail going and was their head brewer and director of brewing for the entire run up until they closed well, just before they closed their downtown production facility not long ago. When he was asked by me for an article for, I believe it was the San Antonio Current, guilty pleasure beers, he said Hans Pils. Well, Hans's Pils is brewed by Real Ale Brewing in Blanco, Texas. I alluded to them earlier, Brad, that Farbstein that got that going. That was named after his dog, who unfortunately isn't with us any longer. But it's a great take on a German Pilsner from a specific area in Germany. He loved it so much. He modified it, tweaked it a little bit, American hops versus some of the German hops, but it'll remind you of an American version of it. But it's that beer. And I thought it was a great answer. It's like, well, my guilty pleasure beer is a craft beer, or what we call a craft beer now. And I'm like, you know what? Damn it, I should have thought of that. But so I got to admit, I have half stolen that from him, but I think it was a great, honest answer. But I'd say, if we're going off of stereotypical guilty pleasures, it'd be Pacifico.
My local Books and Brews, that we've had them on the show in the past, they will occasionally put on PBR on tap.
You know, I can't hate on it. You know, when it comes down to it, it's like, I think we all at some point in time probably had a period where we went through all that stuff is just crap. Well, okay. It's when it comes down to it, it's, if you love it, you love it. It doesn't matter if you go by the definition of what something ought to be, and does it hit that mark, and then is it a good example of that style? That's all a separate discussion. Most of the time when somebody says, oh, that's crap, like PBR or Pacifico or Bud Light, it's because they're like, oh, that's not good beer. That's mass produced swill. And again, I have my thoughts on a lot of that too, on a personal level. But if somebody's cracking open a Bud Light while I'm having a Hans Pils from, Real Ale, I'm not gonna harp on that. There's no reason to. Life's too short.
Agreed.
Yep.
Kind of along those lines, the first and last time I had a Lone Star beer was in Austin, probably in the early teens.
Okay. Yeah, and that's it's still a thing in there. The it sold, as far as Texas goes, it sold a lot more in Austin overall than it did almost anywhere else, and that wasn't always the case. Definitely the 70s and the early 80s, it absolutely outsold in many ways San Antonio. San Antonio had the volumes. I think sales-wise it was a little more, but it's a Lone Star and the mystique of Lone Star with Armadillo World Headquarters, Willie Nelson playing there, tying it into the Cosmic or Outlaw Country, and that whole branding. If you remember seeing posters of armadillos with Lone Stars and things like that at a lot of the bars, though that was all started with Armadillo World Headquarters partnering with, getting Willie Nelson to drink the beer. Hell, they used to just, Lone Star would, as part of the marketing, didn't pay for any of the marketing. They just gave Willie Nelson and his band, whenever they were playing, free Lone Stars to drink, and they'd just be up there being seen drinking Lone Star. And it's like, oh, I love Willie. What's Willie drinking? Gary P. Nunn, all of those guys. And eventually when they started doing, Lone Star started doing some radio commercials, a lot of those guys were happy to jump in and sing the jingle. And so you would have different, the same jingle, but it would be different guys drinking it. Augie Myers, as a lot of that 70s outlaw country that was started in Texas, very much a part of that whole mystique with Lone Star. And so Lone Star and Austin, I think, still have a little bit of a connection to each other. And I actually sort of talked about that in the book. There's one photo in there of a Texas musician, Catherine Legender, and she's got a Lone Star beer on stage, and that's her favorite beer. And I'm like, you know what? There's still a connection. Yep, that's it. Yep. So if Catherine sees this, she's awesome. Go check her and her husband, Brian Broussard, out. They're phenomenal musicians. But yeah, music, country music and Lone Star still hit. It's a I'm at my cigar lounge. If anybody can't tell with the cigar, and one of the regulars popped out and flipped me off. So that's not uncommon for me to get flipped off by people I know. But no, that connection's still there with Austin and music. So yeah, you're going to see it when you still go to Austin as much as you will the craft beer.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was on 6th Street, 6th Ave. I can't remember the name of it.
Oh yeah. No, the Lone Star still sells pretty well up there.
Yeah, I think that was related to it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
Before we start wrapping up, Wendy, do you have any more questions that you want to ask?
What was your gateway craft beer? What was your gateway into the craft beer world? What made you start drinking craft beer?
There's a few that happened right around the same time. Of course, we say craft beer to distinguish it from macro produced beer, for that reason, because it's there's more creativity in it. You see new styles kind of evolving on their own. You see styles starting to, somebody saying, I'm just going to see if I can create a new style, or let me throw some fruity pebbles in this. But it's more the small batch, small ownership really was the reason we do the small independent craft beer thing. But that gateway beer was back when it was just known as a microbrew. So for anybody been around long enough, it was a micro beer or microbrewery. It wasn't craft beer.
Right.
It's at the end of the day, it's beer. But I absolutely understand and agree with the differentiation. So to get back to your question, it was kind of a couple. I would say the first one I would qualify that would definitely qualify as that was Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, and was a lot of firsts for a lot of people. But I didn't have too much of it. It was have it here and there, and it was very hoppy, right? And it was like, okay, well, this is good. I don't mind the hops, but this is I was more drinking wine or cocktails back then. It was when I moved to Austin and I moved to Austin, Texas in late '92. So not long, Pierre Celis and the Celis Brewery were still open. Not long after I moved there, Waterloo Brewing, when brew pubs became legal, had opened up. So I was having beer from Waterloo and from Celis. So I would say those two were more the original big exposure to a craft beer because the breweries were actually there. And although this brewery wasn't there, it was around that time. My ex-wife at the time, or wife at the time, I guess would have been ex-wife now. One of the great things that she did do, not a ton of things, but one of the great things she did do was she would always, every time she went grocery shopping, she'd bring back a 6-pack of beer from somebody different. And one of those first ones was the Pete's Wicked Ales, if we remember those.
Yeah.
The original Pete Wicked's Ale, the amber, and then Pete's Wicked Strawberry Blonde. I mean, I vibed on that Wicked Strawberry Blonde so much. It was silly, but and I kind of, and I've talked to Pete Schlossberg of Pete's about this before, even though Celis and Waterloo kind of being breweries I could go to and have their beers, it was, for some reason, it was Pete's Wicked in those, because I'd moved to San Antonio after that, and we really didn't have much in the way of breweries, just really started loving anything from Pete's Wicked. And so I kind of had a few that led up to that, really hit my stride with Pete's, and then just heavily expanded from there.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I apologize. Not one gateway beer, but apparently 4 or 5.
I don't think there's usually just one that you can credit either. I always say that Killian's it was my gateway beer because it made me realize that beer didn't have to taste like Bud Light.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think the first time we realized that, we're like, oh, there's other styles of beer out there. What the
Yes.
hell's this? Oh, and then you dig deeper, bringing history up. Wait, there used to be other styles of beer in the United States way back in the day.
Yeah.
Prohibition sort of killed that. So yeah, I agree. It's nice to kind of have variety in the United States. Definitely back in the last 40 years.
I recently recalled that my dad always brought back Point Lager from Wisconsin. So as far back as I can remember,
Nice.
and so that would have been my first. This was early '80s. It would have been my first probably craft beer. They certainly weren't as big now, or weren't as big then as they are now. And you can only get it in Wisconsin at the time. Now that's just New Glarus that you can only get in Wisconsin.
Yeah. It is still nice getting a spotted cow now and then.
Yeah. My son just moved out of Madison, so I don't have that link anymore.
Tell him to go back and visit. Yeah, no, it's nice. You touched upon it. If I can say something real quick about you could only get it. You could only go there and get it there. And it's great that a lot of breweries have been able to expand over the decades. Some have pulled back from their expansion and gone back to just a few states. Some have continued to expand. And it's, I remember when Odell Brewing first came to Texas, and I'm like, oh, thank God. Because when I go back to Colorado, visit family a few times a year, I'm drinking 90 shilling like it's going out of style. It hit, and it was like great. And I drank a lot of 90 shilling and other Cutthroat Porter and others of theirs that came into Texas. And then I didn't stop drinking it. I just went back to drinking a variety of stuff. So it's kind of like it's a double-edged sword of you love going to where you can only get it, that one brewery.
Yep.
Maybe they only distribute in the town, or you can only get it at the brewery even. They don't even distribute in town. And that specialness of that and that memory that it creates. New people that you're meeting in the other state you have to travel to go to. And then there's something to be said for getting to have that experience at home in your living room if you pick up a 6-pack of at the store of it. But I don't know. I guess I still kind of like going to places I can only get the beer where I go to.
Yep.
So I love that you brought that up.
We are past the 1 hour mark, so we're going to have to start wrapping up. We wrap every show with a final question that may or may not be beer related. Usually it's not. My standby question, and I'll give Wendy time to think of hers, is what is the last board game or card game that you played?
Ooh. God, I played one about a week ago. I do not remember the name of it. It was a game I had never played before, so I can't tell you the name of it at all.
Do you remember anything about the play?
He'll know what it is.
No, that's all right.
No, and my wife's going to kill me because we played it. It was literally a week ago, and I can't think of the damn name of it. It was similar in some ways to like Go Fish, I guess. You would one round you would have jokers, and twos would be wild in the first round. And you had to collect pairs of threes or pairs of fours. And then the third round, it was threes and jokers, and then fours and jokers, and so forth. And
it's the five.
That's 5 crowns.
5 crowns.
There you go. That's it indeed. That's it indeed.
Yeah.
That's it. Yep.
I just learned how to play that game on a cruise last month. It was awesome. I love it.
It was a pain in the ass, but it actually turned out to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I only went out a couple of the rounds, but at least I did that on the first try. So
right. We played so this work trip I was on, part of the reason my days were so long and unbeery is that we would go back to one of the hotels and play games, and we just played. I learned Magic the Gathering, which I had never played before.
Oh,
yeah.
I did that a lot in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, I have not dug into it yet, but we played Coup, which was, I think, the crowd favorite, and that one was kind of fun. It's a sort of a social deduction game, but less I don't know if you've ever played Secret Hitler or something like that, but
Mhm.
less of that and more you're assigned a role, but you don't have to actually do that role because nobody knows what roles you were assigned. So that one's
Ooh.
fun. We also played Overlap. That one's slightly spatial, but it's Uno-like in that you're trying to go out of cards. We had a great time with that one. And Flip 7, of course.
Okay. That's
Played some
cool.
other games in there too. It was a lot of fun nights.
I had a situation like that. I was in India for work over 20 years ago, for 6 weeks, and every night we'd come back to the hotel and we just played rounds of hearts
Yeah.
for 2 or 3 hours every single night.
Yep. Sometimes you gotta it's a good way to wind down after work, but sometimes you just
Yeah.
want some time.
Oh yeah, 100%. Well, you're working 12-hour days, and then all you want to do is sleep, and then you're up for 3 hours playing
Yep.
cards with everybody. So
Yep.
yeah.
So my question, I haven't played any games recently, unfortunately, not since the ones we talked about last time. But my question is, usually at any given time, I'm vibing on a different beer. So like right now, my summer beer is Drafting Table, which is a local brewery here. Their picnic something.
Oh no.
What the heck? I just had it in my head. Picnic juice. It is a watermelon goza, and I'm obsessed. Every time I find a watermelon goza or a any fruited beer with watermelon in it, I have to try it. And it's so delicious.
Nice.
So my question for you is, what beer are you vibing on? What can we expect is going to be a staple in your fridge over the next couple months?
Staple in the fridge would, till the end of time, is going to be Hans Pils. I brought it up earlier. But another one that, recently had been really connecting with, he hasn't done it in a while, so I haven't had it in a while, was called Ube Coconut. Made with, so it was a coconut porter, but made with the purple ube coconut from the Philippines, and it was Eric at Thirsty Pups.
Okay.
In San Antonio that you were at, and it's like, because the foam, the head on the beer was purple from the coconut.
Nice.
And it was a coconut character to it, but a different coconut character because it was a different type of thing. So that anytime that's been in there, I'll absolutely grab it. But the fridge doesn't have any in it right now, and I'll apologize to Brad, but Hans Pils.
Awesome.
Yeah, mine always has dragon's milk in it, but it's not necessarily because I'm vibing on it, just because that goes slower. And I got to make sure it's there.
There is that.
So.
Yep.
Jeremy, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Where can people find your books?
For those in the Austin, San Antonio area, you can get them should be at Book People in Austin. You may see it at I've seen it at Target and CVS and Walgreens. I've seen some of the other books there, so I believe they're going to eventually have it. In San Antonio, the Twig Bookshop, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million will have it. There's the San Antonio Museum of Art, which was the original Lone Star Brewing Association building. They may be carrying it, hopefully, in their gift shop, since it deals with their building. But online, for most people who probably may be needing to get it that way, Amazon, of course, and then all the major bookstores, it's available through them online as well, and the publisher also.
Okay.
And it's Arcadia Publishing and the History Press.
Okay. Do you have any events coming up that you want to plug? Put you on the spot.
Let's see, I want to say in about 3 or 4 weeks, I'm going to have a signing up here in New Braunfels. Location is not yet determined. It may be at my cigar lounge. they want to do something, so it may be there, but that's supposed to be in about a month ago. But I have signings with a couple of other places, just not firm dates.
Okay. All right. Sounds like end of August is when that all will be starting then.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Wendy, do you have anything coming up that you want to talk about?
Not this week.
Okay. Okay. My big thing is that I'm going to Grand Rapids again for Labor Day weekend. I will be up there. So anyone else in Grand Rapids, come and see me. I'll be down at the DeVos Center playing board games at Grand Con, which is a great time.
Awesome.
I will also be at all the breweries near DeVos Center.
Yes, I do want to plug that in 2 weeks we will have the brewer and owner of Cabin North Brewing, which is the brewery that just appeared out of nowhere in Detroit. So I'm super excited that I was able to stop in and get him on the show so we can find out what that story is, man.
Yeah, it sounds great how they kept it under wraps for so long.
I have no idea. I'm like, the brewery opened and we had no idea it was coming.
That's great.
That's a nice surprise.
Yeah, it was an awesome surprise. Good beer too. I like the Kolsch a lot.
Awesome.
That helps. Okay, well, that will just about do it then. I'm going to go ahead and close the show like we close every show and say, whatever you think of your beer, we think gets better on draft.
Cheers.